3 days ago, a study dropped in PNAS, one of the most prestigious science journals in the world, and it put a number on something most of us feel but never thought could be measured. Each person in your life who regularly causes you stress, who hassles you, who makes your life harder, is associated with your body aging about 9 months faster. Not emotionally, not metaphorically, biologically, measurably in your DNA. And the way they measured it is fascinating. We all know stress is bad for you. That is not news. But stress is bad is like saying weather exists. It is vague, it is obvious, and it does not tell you anything useful. What this team did is very different. They did not ask people, are you stressed? They mapped the actual social networks of over 2,600 people in Indiana. Every close contact, every confidant, every person they spend their free time with. And then they asked for each of those people individually, does this person hassle you, cause problems, or make your life difficult? Occasionally, often, or never? That is an incredibly specific question. And the people who got flagged this way, the researchers call them hasslers. Now, before we get into what they found, think about your own life for a second. You probably have somewhere around 5 close contacts. That is the average in this study. And statistically, about 1 in 4 of those people qualifies as a hassler. Not some abstract, toxic person from a self-help book. Just someone who, when you honestly assess the relationship, regularly makes things harder. 60% of people in this study had at least one hassler in their network. This is not rare. This is the norm. So what did they actually measure? This is where it gets genuinely interesting. They collected saliva samples from these participants and analyzed their DNA methylation patterns. Now, DNA methylation is basically a set of chemical tags on your DNA that change as you age. Scientists have developed what they call epigenetic clocks, algorithms that read these tags and estimate how fast your body is actually aging. Independent of your birthday, they use 2 of the most validated clocks out there. One called DunedinPACE, which measures the speed of biological aging. Think of it like a speedometer. Are you aging at 1 year per year or 1.2 years per year? The other is called GrimAge2, which estimates your cumulative biological age. Think of it like an odometer. It tells you how much total biological wear and tear has accumulated. And when they compared these biological aging measurements against the number of hasslers in each person's network, the pattern was clear. Each additional hassler was associated with roughly 1.5% faster pace of aging and about 9 months of additional biological age. Let me make that concrete. Say you have 2 people who are the same calendar age, same gender, similar backgrounds, but one of them has 3 hasslers in their close circle and the other has none. The person with 3 hasslers on average shows a biological age roughly 2.25 years older. Their body's operating as if it has been through more time than it actually has. Now, that number, 9 months per hassler, it sounds dramatic, and I want to be precise about what it means and what it does not mean. It does not mean you literally lose 9 months of life for every difficult person you know. This is not a countdown. What it means is that the biological systems associated with aging, inflammation, immune function, cellular repair, those systems are measurably shifted in the wrong direction. It is a risk marker, a signal that the body is under more load. But the actual finding that I think is the most interesting part of this entire study is not the 9 months number. It is something that runs completely against what you might expect. The researchers broke down hasslers by relationship type, relatives, non-relatives, and spouses. And the result was strange. Hasslers who were relatives, strong association with accelerated aging. Hasslers who were friends or acquaintances, also a strong association. But hasslers who were spouses or partners, no significant association with accelerated aging. Your difficult uncle seems to age you biologically. Your annoying neighbor seems to age you biologically. But your difficult spouse, at least in this data, does not show the same effect. That is genuinely puzzling. And there are a few possible explanations. One is that marriages, even stressful ones, often come with a lot of simultaneous support. You might fight with your partner, but they also drive you to the hospital, split the bills, remind you to take your medication, the net biological effect might cancel out. Another possibility, and the researchers acknowledge this, is selection bias. The people who are in the most destructive relationships might not be the ones showing up to complete surveys and give saliva samples. We do not know, but it is a strange and memorable finding. Now, there is another layer to this that makes the whole picture more complicated and honestly more unsettling. The researchers looked at whether all hasslers are equal, and they found that ambivalent ties, people who are both supportive and stressful, showed a stronger association with accelerated aging than people who were purely negative. Think about that for a second. The person who is consistently awful to you, your body might actually handle that better than the person who is wonderful on Monday and terrible on Wednesday. The person who hugs you and then criticizes you in the same conversation. The proposed mechanism makes intuitive sense. If someone is always negative, you can distance yourself. You can write them off. Your stress response activates, but it also resolves because you know what to expect. But an ambivalent relationship? That is unpredictable. Your alarm system never fully turns off. You are always a little bit braced for impact, even during the good moments. And that chronic, low-grade activation of your stress systems, cortisol, inflammation, immune dysregulation, that is exactly what epigenetic aging clocks are picking up. It is like the difference between a loud alarm that goes off once and you deal with it, versus a smoke detector with a low battery that beeps every 45 seconds for months. The single loud alarm is stressful but manageable. The intermittent beep slowly drives you insane, and apparently slowly drives your biology toward an older state. There is also a threshold effect in the data. When hasslers make up more than 50% of someone's social network, the associations with accelerated aging become much more pronounced. This is not a linear, gradual slope. There seems to be a tipping point where the ratio of negative to positive contacts in your life crosses some kind of line, and the biological consequences ramp up sharply. Now, here is where we need to be honest about the limitations. And this matters because the difference between a good science channel and a clickbait headline is exactly this part. This is a cross-sectional study. It is a snapshot. They measured hasslers and biological aging at roughly the same point in time. That means we cannot say with certainty that hasslers cause the accelerated aging. It is entirely plausible that the arrow goes the other way. People who are already in worse health, who are already aging faster, might attract more conflict. They might be harder to be around. They might be more dependent on relationships that generate friction. Reverse causation is a real possibility. There are also confounding variables. The study did find that certain groups, women, daily smokers, people with adverse childhood experiences, people already in poor health, were more likely to report hasslers. So there are shared risk factors feeding into both sides of the equation. The researchers controlled for many of these, but in observational research, you can never control for everything. There is also a methodological detail worth mentioning. They measured DNA methylation from saliva, not blood. Saliva is a mix of immune cells and epithelial cells, and the proportions of those cell types can vary between people. Social stress could theoretically change the cellular composition of your saliva, which could affect the methylation readings. Good studies account for this, and there are reference panels to estimate cell type proportions, but it adds a layer of uncertainty. And the sample, while solid at over 2,600 participants with face-to-face interviews and biological measurements, is drawn from one state, Indiana. Whether these patterns hold across different cultures, different countries, different social structures, that remains to be tested. So what do we actually take away from this? I think the most important shift this study represents is not any single number. It is the idea that the people around you are a health environment. We already think this way about air quality, about water, about chemicals in our food. We quantify those exposures and link them to disease. This study is doing the same thing with social exposures. It is saying the person who stresses you out every week is not just an emotional inconvenience. They are statistically a measurable input into your biological aging trajectory. And that reframe matters because right now, when a doctor asks about your health risks, they ask if you smoke, if you drink, how much you exercise, whether you have a family history of disease. They do not ask who in your life is regularly making things harder. The researchers behind this paper have specifically suggested that health screenings could include a question like that. Not, do you have support, but who in your life is a consistent source of stress? The practical takeaway is not to go cut people out of your life. That is the self-help oversimplification. The real insight is subtler. It is that the ratio matters. If your network is mostly supportive with one difficult person, your biology seems to handle that. But if your network tips past that 50% threshold, if more of your close contacts are hasslers than not, that is when the biological signal gets loud. And maybe the most uncomfortable implication is the ambivalence finding. Because the people who are hardest to deal with are often not the ones who are easy to label as toxic. They are the ones who love you and hurt you in the same breath. The ones where leaving feels impossible because the good moments are real. And according to this data, those might be the relationships that get under your skin the deepest. Literally. We spend a lot of time optimizing our health. We track our steps, our sleep, our macros, our supplements. We buy standing desks and air purifiers and organic produce. And all of that probably matters. But maybe the most powerful health variable in your life has a name and a phone number. If you want more of the latest science discoveries that are quietly changing how we understand ourselves, there is always something new worth knowing.